Hello, and welcome to the JupyterLab weekly call for the 12th of July. Today we have 15 people on the call, and we have a sparse agenda. So if you would like to talk about something, today's the day you can capitalize. And if not, we'll probably have a rather short call. Although I wonder if I stall longer, if I'll see Fred adding things to the things that he wants to talk about. I think that is the case. Nonetheless, I will pass it on to Fred so he can actually talk about it.
Thanks, Darian. So just a status update about the cleanup of the GitHub organization. So I have opened the issue like we discussed 3 weeks ago, mentioning that there is a 2 weeks notice, and if nobody jump in, I will archive the repository. So that's just for information, and also I haven't done it yet, but I will open 2 issue on the Team Compass, but we can start discussing if nobody has anything else to say. We should define probably a bit more strongly what are the rights of the members on GitHub. Because basically now that we have the console, the official console, like since a bit more than a year, I think now, there is a team that's the console. There is also a specific team that has the power to release. It's not the same team, but there is no rules for who is in the release team, and there is also no rules to define who has the power who is the owner at the GitHub organization level. And yeah, and mainly the idea that we need to have behind that discussion is that the console is too big for everybody to be owner of everything. So there is 21 members, I think, on the console. And for security reason, we should not have so many people having high rights for publication and for ownership of the GitHub organization. And that's the reason we should clarify and probably write down somewhere what's the process for that, and like maybe having something like for the software steering council representative to have some kind of elections and say that every year we decide, like, we refresh the list of people able to release and people that have ownership on the GitHub organization. So that's one of the issue I want to open. And the other one is we discussed it, but we did not go into the detail of changing the versioning of the packages with JupyterLab 4, meaning that we should try to update the version of the only of the package that get updated, a bit like what we are doing for Lumino. This will ease the work of downstream extension, and in the long term, we can hope that with new major version, most of the API of core won't change, and so it will ease also upgrading extension to a new major version of JupyterLab. But we definitely should discuss a bit more the detail of that, because it has high implication on the tooling we are using for now. Because, for instance, every time we do a new minor release, we create a new branches, we bump old version, and old version are aligned. And so, yeah, there are lots of questions for like handling the code and the repositories itself if we change how we do the versioning. Yeah.
So with relation to releasers, what if whenever there's a release upcoming, we ask for members of the council who is interested in doing a release, and whoever volunteers gets put in that list. And then the policy is, I don't know, once a year, twice a year, something. What we do is we just check with every member of that list. Hey, do you still want to be on here? And if they don't respond within, I don't know, 3 weeks or something, then they automatically drop until the next time they volunteer again. But that way we don't have to nominate anyone or anything. It's just whoever volunteers to do a release. And as a last resort, the SSC rep always is on that list just to make sure the list never goes to zero. But really, it shouldn't go to zero because we've had lots of people volunteer to do releases in the past. So hopefully we'll continue to have that in the future. That's just a suggestion. At least I'm trying to remove like another decision point, sort of, and allow people to volunteer, but also maintain security. But I'm happy to be wrong on this. It's just off the cuff what I'm thinking. So I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts.
I quite like that idea.
Okay, any objections to this path? Or any amendments, or does anyone have a better, like, how do we manage a subset of the JupyterLab Council as releasers without compromising release security and without making it too difficult for anyone who wants to work on something to work on it? That's, I guess, the constraints of the problem. Okay, so probably the more complex conversation will be versioning. Does anyone have any thoughts on that aspect?
As an extension.
Sorry, Eric, just to point out that Nick and Mike commented on the chat for the release, pointing out that we should ensure some kind of across employers coverage to be sure that it's not owned by a single person, and Mike agree on that. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think a way of doing this is as a release comes up and we look at the release managers we have, if we see not enough redundancy there, we just simply say, hey, look, is anyone who does not work at company X interested in doing this release this time? Because it would be healthier for us to release that way, because we might all take the day off or go to a company thing or you know, the bus factor and all that stuff, right? So we could try to organically address this, but it's definitely a good guiding principle. Like, you know, even if this isn't a thing we end up voting on, probably we should have written down somewhere some version of, hey, here's how we're trying to manage this process. So the issue you're opening is, I don't imagine it'll lead to a vote, but at least it'll be like a thing. Maybe it'll lead to a PR or something that just has some like guidance in our team compass.
Yeah, then I start a PR with it directly and with those ID in it. Yeah.
Cool.
So, sorry, Eric.
Oh, no
Yeah.
problem.
So any last thoughts on this releasers subject? Because if not, we can talk about versioning. Okay, so just to recall, the idea was that with JupyterLab 4 onward, we were not going to bump the major version of any JavaScript package just because the Python package called JupyterLab was getting a major version bump. We were only going to do that when it became absolutely necessary following the rules of Semver, because those are standalone things that people consume independent of JupyterLab. And if they don't need to be bumped, then everyone's better off it moving slowly. So that was the premise. Now, the practice of it isn't just one simple thing, right? It's a little complex because of dependencies between each other and also because of Lumino. And
Right.
so, yes. Now, please go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I sometimes ask myself as an extension author, I mean, I kind of want to be using whatever the latest versions of those packages are. But I think kind of right, like each release of lab might use a different set of those NPM packages. So I find myself asking, what do I need to have for this particular version for compatibility? And I guess that's kind of the problem that bumping the versions all at once kind of tries to solve. So I guess I kind of want to document that somewhere, I guess, maybe telling people how they can figure out what they need to get.
If we could programmatically with some bot generate the readmes of those individual NPM packages in the repo to say version 2 up to version 3.5 works in JupyterLab 3, but after that, or version 2 up to less than 4 works, right? But something like, if we could generate that, that would be a useful guide, but that's still hard to find. You're right, there's a trade-off here. If we don't bump versions each time, then you can't be like, oh, I just want application 5 for JupyterLab 5, right?
Yeah. And I think
So that's
we
true.
already kind of have this problem with some of the sub packages, right? Like I think there's one or two that are like 6 point something or something like that.
Yeah,
Right.
but there's also ones that are like lower, right? Render mime interfaces moves very slowly. Vidar, what's up?
Yeah, so if you just want to support like the latest, right? You have like NPM outdated or Yarn outdated or similar tools. I think the challenge is just saying like, oh, I want to support the latest version, major version of JupyterLab, and also the previous ones. Because if you're just trying to find like what was like the package versions that was supported or was out during like the last major version of JupyterLab, that's when you have to go and actually look it up, because you can't just take the latest and greatest. You have to kind of figure out. So the meta package might help with something like that as a lookup tool for like what we have this meta package, right? I think it's actually also called the meta package. I don't remember. But it's not, straightforward. So, but yeah, for just the latest version, I think there are generic NPM and Yarn tools that can help. Your IDE might also help you tell you what is the latest version of the package when you're looking at the package JSON file, right? There is also this tool that we have where you can use what is it, building the what is it, dependency update or something like that, is build utils. JupyterLab build utils, I think, has this one tool where you can bump generic JavaScript package version and you can put in like a regex to match all the JupyterLab packages. For example, the latest. That could be expanded upon.
I wonder if we could provide a Jupyter, a JLPM command that says JLPM add, well, not JLPM, but it would have to be Jupyter because we're going to do custom stuff. But anyway, add JupyterLab / application for JupyterLab equals 3 or something like that. Like, I wonder if we could create a command line tool that lets an extension author target a version of lab I mean, the other approach to this is a thing that we haven't made that much progress on yet, but we've been at least kicking the ball around some, which is writing extensions that are a bit less dependent on these package versions because of what they consume and what they export. So a lot of this stuff is less difficult if you don't need exactly the same class, because you're not doing type of comparisons and you're not doing like live objects being passed that way. If instead you're doing your application construction with a different set of primitives than here's a live JavaScript object. So it's possible we end up having a whole different kind of extension while also supporting these the same way we used to have NPM only extensions, but now no one really deals with the NPM side. Yeah, perhaps JSON schema has something to do with this.
I'll also add, while you're talking about that, if you imagine that as kind of a higher level API, because I'm sure you're like super excited about me throwing another thing into the mix, but like I just think of the possibility for adding other language endpoints for that really, really high level API, like having a JavaScript API that uses that very, very high level API scheme, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a complex problem, and we don't want a few years down the line to be like, oh, now we need a third extension type because the first two were not fit for purpose either. So it would be really good if we basically de novo create a new extension type and see how far the current architecture is from supporting it, and see if it's worth JupyterLab 5 delivering that. But
yeah,
I mean, yeah, so we need to get I think a working group together for some of this, because some people are very interested in this and some people are more interested in it working and not building it. So I think we should get a group of people together. I think Fred tried and we didn't get a group together, so we could try again. But yeah, I mean, not just thinking about Lab 5, but also thinking about sustainability of extensions in the ecosystem if they all start to suffer from bit rot. There's also the concern of how hard it might be to support lots of different types of Jupyter front ends, because that's happening. And so, yeah, other people, please chime in.
I'm at least just really happy that the ball is being kicked around and people are having these discussions, because I think it's really, these are really good, important discussions to have.
I think some of
Okay.
this is fortuitous too, with some of the discussions we've been having about the schemas, being able to extend those. That has a pretty strong sustainability feature to it if they're used and implemented properly. But it's exciting that y'all are talking about this.
Never in my life have I met people so excited about schemas until I came to Jupyter.
They bring everybody together. It's like, how do you play? There's like a schema to sports. It's like you can't play together unless you got that thing. Yeah.
Okay, so actionable though, Fred, what do you take from this conversation for the actual decision on versioning?
Good question. For versioning, I don't know, but we definitely need to think a bit more about what we will do, because Even if it's just not bumping the major version, there are some stuff to do, at least on the tooling of the project. But yeah.
I think one of the other minimal targets would just be, as I think Darian suggested, maybe like make a tool one that can maybe pull data out of the meta package and post that into the documentation somewhere, or maybe the change log, because we already do automated change logs. I wonder if you could at a minimum just communicate, if you're not going to bump them all, then communicate somewhere, I guess, that information.
If there could be a job that puts a table like this in the extension author's guide, I think that's the ideal place. And
Yeah.
that sort of solves the problem of how to communicate it as well.
For sure.
I don't know how hard that is to generate. That doesn't sound that hard because the branches have well-formed names. Versions are queryable both from GitHub and from PyPI. So this is a doable job for sure.
Yeah, probably some kind of git diff between two known commit and then printing that nicely in the documentation would do the job. Yeah.
Oh, I just meant what you do is you say, give me the branch for 3.6.1, or if the user said 3.x, whatever it is, right? Then you go in there, you go into the meta package, you grab its package.json, and you just spit out, here are the versions that will guaranteed work in this version of lab. Something like that is what I'm imagining.
Yeah, that's simple too.
Does anyone have the inclination to work on such a thing? I know some of you people write Python. I don't write Python, so I have no idea how to do such a thing, but I'm pretty sure someone here does Python. Yeah, that's a good question. So I don't know if staging is the right place or if meta package is the right place, but one of these, like, it's a known thing, right? There's a version, it's crystallized in time in a branch with a known name, and there's a file in that branch with the known name that contains the information you want. I'm not sure which it is, but yeah, it might be staging. You're right, because that's what it ships with. So
I can put this on my to-do list, though I know that I probably won't be doing it very soon.
well, how about, can you write this as an issue and put a help wanted on it and
Yeah.
all that stuff? And then if it never gets done, then we can
Yeah.
ask for volunteers again.
Yeah, I can do that.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Eric.
There's a note to remind people that accessibility is 15 minutes after this call ends. Well, no, it is 47 minutes from now. There you go. Because this call, I don't know when it ends. And the next person up is Mike.
I am. So I recently bumped into a problem of after porting an extension to JupyterLab 4, I wanted to avoid introducing dependency on Lab 4 so that users of future notebook version 7 to be released soon don't have to install JupyterLab when installing that extension. And that's spell checker, but also LSP possibly. And the problem is that when you use Python packaging, there isn't a nice way to do that declaratively in the metadata. Because if we say that we want version older than 4, sorry, newer than 3, we will get that installed. There is no or, and there is no negation, as far as I'm aware. If anyone knows how to work around that, I'm open to propositions, but there is one way that can be done is to dynamically define install requires or a newer equivalent, which might be very bad, but I didn't. Okay, I think Nick has some comments in the chat. Yeah, so what do you all think? What is the solution here? Should we try to do that dynamically and possibly augment hatch so that it's easy to say, or have some other heuristic to alert user that the extension will not work with JupyterLab 3 or older, and it will not work with Notebook 6 or older. And otherwise we'll either install a new version of Lab or Notebook, or we'll do nothing.
Yep, Python's not going to help you do that. That's just what it is, unfortunately. So is it purely a client side thing, and you're just riding on pip to do the dependency resolution, which you're not resolving? Yeah, it won't really do that. I mean, Conda has like weird optional dependencies that are different from extras. You can make an extra, you know, recommended lab, recommended notebook, or something like that. But extras don't work over time either. So
Yeah, so then we would remove from the README, we would remove normal installation, just show two extras, two ways to install, depending on whether you have Lab or Notebook. But users will still end up sometimes like installing that straight away and then complaining that it doesn't work in Lab 3.
Well, the problem with extras is that they don't work over time. So if you do another solve later and it updates a transient dependency that has an extra that you installed via an extra, it won't do anything with that. So it doesn't actually help you manage versions. It's just a formality. Yeah, there isn't really a good answer for that. I mean, you'd have to look at the specific case. Like in the case of a widget, you know, generally the guidance has not been to do that because you're really just using pip to make sure that you get a client and a server component that work together. For a purely client thing, I don't know how you can do that. It doesn't really do that. I don't know how to. Yeah.
So what is your opinion on dynamic install requires? What is the downside of that? I didn't get the comment.
Users download wheels and wheels don't. Like you can the only dynamic ones that work in wheels are ones that are based on extras, which like magnifies how broken things are. So yeah, but the setup pi thing doesn't. Do not assume your setup pi will ever be run on an end user's computer.
Okay.
Like we're never going to get a specifier flag in the mini language in packaging and in pip and in 6 other places where it's implemented. Like there's never going to be a JupyterLab underscore version, like a Python version. It's not going to happen. So do you have a concrete link to what you're talking about? Like
yeah.
What is the problem of declaring the dependency on a known range that you've tested against?
So in spell checker extension, for example, if I declare JupyterLab 4 or newer, I will force users of Notebook to install JupyterLab.
They are already forced.
Are they?
Can I get a woot woot? Pretty sure. Certainly JupyterLab server.
Wait. You're talking about notebook 6 users?
Notebook 7.
Yeah, that'll bring in lab as a dependency.
Lab server.
A compatible one with notebook. Yeah.
Wait, let me just double check.
Okay. Maybe we can follow up offline. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it requires JupyterLab.
Right. We inverted the dependency. JupyterLab used to require notebook, and now notebook requires lab.
Yeah.
And the only way we would get around that would be with some like Jupyter client, which you can't
Yeah.
call Jupyter client, that means kernels. But something that stood in between them as some sort of API shibboleth between front ends.
Yeah, we
But-
could create a Jupyter front end instead of having it within the JupyterLab repo, and then we could move all the common stuff there, and then we could have both JupyterLab and Notebook depend on Jupyter front end. But as it stands now, because Notebook is effectively a spin of JupyterLab, and we haven't extracted those packages out yet completely, Notebook depends on Lab, yeah.
Okay, that's probably solves my question. Well, it's still going the other way around. If you have an extension and want to specify notebook version, you would potentially install notebook as an extra.
Well,
but that's a lesser problem probably.
yeah, and your Notebook version would have to be the one that is sibling with the lab version you're targeting. So chances are very good it's there. I think we're moving to a world where these siblings are very compatible with each other. But yeah, I mean, there might be some edge cases we're missing here. And if we find as people build more applications that it does make sense to basically turn the JupyterLab repo into more of a specific spin of a Jupyter front end and to move a whole bunch of core into a Jupyter front end, we could do that.
Yeah, that sounds like a very reasonable future, possibly lab 5 or something. All right, thank you very much. That solves my question and kind of outlines a vision for the future.
Cool.
So 2 other points are just to highlight some of regressions in 4.0 which users complained repetitively or didn't receive much of attention and are unassigned. These are string issues in console. So if you open a console, not a terminal, a console in lab, you will see cursors in each of the cells. There is a problem with outputs which are moved to a new panel using create a new view function because they don't work. So that's a severe regression. Syntax highlighting in Python built-in functions doesn't work, but there is kind of a draft of a workaround that we could implement. If anyone is interested, I can give more hints on that one. And finally, horizontal scrolling doesn't work. I'm not sure if it's only Firefox, but there are some issues like people having large pandas data frames. So these are.
So far, I've only seen that in Firefox from reporters.
Right. And I highlighted 3 pull requests with its review label. And I think that's one of those can be closed as Frederick is commenting, and 2 other are pending review. Okay. All from me. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Anyone want to? Oh, look at that. Got some volunteers to review those. Thanks, Fred. Okay, cool. Well, we've reached the
No,
end of the.
The second is to mention that it's mine, so I cannot review it. So for once, I cannot be my own volunteer.
Okay, great. So I will review that one. Please assign me. Wait, does anyone else want to do this? It's a tough crowd, I'm telling you.
The wrong order to come with those statements in.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
You
Anyone
got
want to chime
assigned,
in?
Shane.
Anyone want to chime in with something pleasant? No, okay, fine, cool. Okay, anyone else want to talk about something? We have some time and there's nothing left on the agenda. All right, I will stop the recording. Brace yourselves.